Okay, hello, welcome to our presentation. Thanks very much for taking the time to come and see us today. Today, we're going to be talking about how a virtual reality company, which is us, Visualise, and a UI UX design company, which is these guys, Kickpush, came together to produce a really fantastically well-designed VR experience. So, my name is Will McMaster. I'm head of VR at Visualise, and
I'm Sam, developer from Visualise.
I'm Sam Applebee, co-founder at Kickpush.
And Alex Deruette, also co-founder at Kickpush.
okay, so I'm going to kick things off by just telling you guys a little bit about Visualise and what we do as a company. So Visualise is a virtual reality production studio. Primarily, Visualise produces 360 video, but we also produce a lot of CG-based VR experiences. How many of you guys out here have tried VR before? Maybe just get a little, okay, so like 80% of you, which is amazing. So Visualise was founded in 2012, so we've been producing VR for quite a while. We've produced about 80 VR experiences so far. We're based in London, in Shoreditch, in Second Home, actually, the same building as these guys. And I myself, I direct a lot of the VR experiences that we produce. I've directed 15 VR experiences so far. And yeah, I mean, that's basically a general overview of Visualise.
Yeah, so Kickpush, we're a specialist product design studio. We do digital products rather than physical products, so we don't design handbags, although Alex might have a go if you give him a chance. So we specialise in UX and UI design. That's always traditionally been mobile and web, and most recently, the last 9 months, we've been making a foray into virtual reality apps as well. This might be a stupid question at this event, but how many actual designers are there in the room? Okay, excellent. How many of you guys are using Sketch? Okay, cool, that would be useful. One man walking down the stairs with his hand up as well. Okay, great. So look, today we're going to be talking about the virtual reality app that we built together for The Economist. This is a little sneak peek. We're going to get into some of the technical details, so I hope you guys want some of the nitty gritty. And really and truly, we'd like you to be able to go away today and go home, get on your laptops and actually start designing apps for virtual reality. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Will, who's going to tell us a bit more about what's going on in the space at the moment.
Okay, so I mean, a lot of you guys have tried virtual reality. It's probably a good idea to just give a little refresher about where we're at with virtual reality, because there's a huge amount of hype surrounding VR these days. Virtual reality has been around for a while. It's been around since the 1960s. It had a kind of a resurgence in the 90s, but then due to a number of factors of complexity, lack of computing power, and costs, in the 90s, VR sort of disappeared. But then it came back. In 2012, it came back when Oculus announced a Kickstarter of a consumer-level virtual reality headset called the Oculus Rift, which I'm sure probably a lot of you guys have heard about. Virtual reality still wasn't really taken too seriously in 2012 and 2013, but then in 2014, Oculus was bought out by Facebook for $2 billion. And it was that moment when VR started to be taken really seriously. And it was from there that Google got into virtual reality with the cardboard, and now with Google's new Pixel phone, you've got the Daydream headset. Sony got into virtual reality. PlayStation VR just got released recently. And HTC has gotten into VR by making the Vive headset with Steam. So it was really, 2014 was really kind of the inflection point of the rebirth of VR. And that's kind of where we're at now. We've got all these headsets that have come out in 2016, and finally the content and the quality of the content is catching up. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about our relationship with The Economist. So the app that we all produced together was for The Economist. And we've been working with The Economist for a while on producing virtual reality. So the first piece of content that we made for The Economist was a piece called Rico VR Mosul. And this was a virtual reconstruction of a museum in Iraq, in Mosul, which was destroyed by ISIS. So we worked with The Economist to rebuild the museum in CG. and to using photogrammetry to rebuild a lot of the artifacts that were in the museum. So it was a really great project and a really excellent use of VR. The next piece we did with The Economist is called Hidden Cities Osaka, which is kind of like a travelogue around Osaka. This is shot with a 360 video camera. And it kind of takes you to some more nitty-gritty places in Osaka. So it's kind of a travel piece. So we made these two pieces of content for The Economist, one in 2015 and one earlier this year. And The Economist started getting really interested in the idea of producing their own VR platform. So they came back to us with this idea for a VR platform. They said, we want you guys to make a platform where people can download our app and go in and get all different kinds of experiences that we're going to produce. And they told us that the platform had to be really easy to use. Because these days in VR, most of your users are going to be very inexperienced with even using a VR headset. In fact, in a lot of cases, the person using your app may be trying VR for the first time. So it had to be super, super intuitive and super easy to use. The next thing that we really needed to do was we needed a way of prototyping the experience. So we needed a way of designing it without fully building it so that we could show it to The Economist, they could get it signed off, and they could sort of agree on what the design was. And there really is not an easy way for us as a company to do that because we're not really designers, we are more virtual reality content creators.
But we could do that. I mean, at this stage, not really. We were mobile app designers, web designers. So we had a process that was set for flat design, right? So we're not going to spend too much time talking about our process, but you might be comfortable with it. We start with UX design, wireframes, user flows, normal stuff. Second part is visual design, so just making all these wireframes beautiful. And the last part is motion design, where we turn all this stuff to life, right? So we're not going to spend too much time on that, but we're going to show you in a bit how we translated this process into a virtual reality design process. So let's take a quick step back. About 6 months ago, we decided to start doing VR. With no specific knowledge about it, we knew it was something cool, people were talking about it. So we were looking for a way to get started. Everyone was telling us, you gotta learn Unity, you can only design VR in 3D. We tried, we failed, and then we thought, you know what, a VR interface really is just a flat 2D interface placed in a 3D environment. So there must be a way to do it in Sketch and design them the same way we design mobile apps, all right? So we started doing research, and the first real challenge we had was to define a canvas size. When you design for mobile apps, websites, you know what the screen size to use. You're going to use your device size. But when you design for VR, you're dealing with a 360 environment, something that is overwhelming at first. But when you think about it, if you talk only about VR interfaces, just assume users will be sitting on their sofa and they want to interact with it. They will most likely just be sitting here and all you're interested in is this area in front of them, right? So that's about 47 degrees left, 47 degrees right, and 32 degrees up and down for the maximum comfort. And from that point, we started having something interesting. We managed to isolate just one specific area for the user interface, which means that we started having some kind of canvas that was close to a mobile device canvas. And at this stage, we got stuck. We still didn't know how to prototype it, how to preview it. We just had something to bring to experts, but we needed more for them to understand how to take it to the next step. So we talked to Visualise.
Yeah, so So Kickpush came up into our office, and they wanted to learn more about VR. So the first thing that we did was we gave them a VR headset. It's really important if you're going to be designing something for VR that you spend time in VR. The second thing that we did was we talked a lot about the challenges of VR in terms of things like user comfort. I mean, Alex touched on that a little bit, but user comfort is super, super important in VR. You really need to avoid things like objects being too close to the viewer's eyes. Stuff that's far away is kind of hard to see and a little bit hard to read. So these are all kind of still developing ideas about what works and what doesn't in virtual reality. So we gave them all of our knowledge, basically, what we knew about that so far. And the last thing that we did was we gave them a list of apps to download for VR, which we thought were really awesome examples of VR experiences and really terrible examples of VR experiences. Because I think that you really need to see for yourself in the headset what works and what doesn't. And oftentimes when we talk to other companies that we're collaborating with or to partners that we're creatively collaborating with, they haven't really even spent that much time in VR. So the first thing we tell them is get a headset, spend a few hours in there, see what you like and what you don't like, basically.
All right, so we took all this knowledge, we spent hours and hours with Sam, Will, trying to understand this new space, and still trying to figure out how to design all these things in 2D and find a way to prototype it. And eventually, we managed to crack it. So it's good we have designers in the room because it's going to get a bit technical, but by the time we're finished with the demo, any of you guys will be able to go home and design a VR interface with the skills you have right now. All right? So I was talking about the canvas size a second ago. We ended up going with 2 canvas sizes. All right? We have the big canvas, which is the 360 view, we're going to explain later, and a smaller one in the middle, which is the UI view, which is the area that interests us as UI UX designers, right? 360 view. It is 3,600 pixels by 1,800 pixels. What you can see as a background is an equirectangular image. It's a flat representation of a 360 environment. Later on, if you take this image and wrap it in a 3D sphere, the whole environment will look like a real one in VR. All right? And in the middle of this 360 view, you have the UI view, 1,200 pixels by 600 pixels. And that's what the final interface looks like. You have this tiny bit of UI lost in the middle of the big 360 environment, right? Everything is designed flat, in Sketch, like you would design a website. And now, demo time. Right. Can I use this mic? Yeah? Oh, perfect. All right. So what we want to show you guys is how simple, starting from scratch, you can design one of these interfaces. Okay. So if you guys know Sketch, you're familiar with that. We have our 2 canvases, the 360 view with our grid, and the UI view next to it. Okay, I'm just going to duplicate this. Delete all that. Okay, so first thing to do, I did prepare some assets. Add your 360 background. That's something we got from Google Image. You can find loads if you just type equirectangular photo. Then I'm going to duplicate this background and stick it right in the middle of my UI view. Okay? So we're only going to work on this UI view for now. Just going to use UI elements. This could be video tiles, buttons, whatever you want. Just a quick logo, just because. Okay. So now we have something that looks like an interface. all right? And now I want to test it in VR, because that's not enough. I'm just going to stick my UI view right in the middle of my 360 view. You can see it just matches. And I'm going to export a simple PNG, a flat image, to my desktop. And now it's getting fun. So this software is called Color Eyes. It's free. You can download it online, and it's sponsored by GoPro. So I have my PNG, right? Normal photo. I'm just going to drag it in. And now, using an Oculus DK1, just 1 second. No, so good. I have a real VR UI done in literally 5 minutes using the tools that you're using today, right? That's the workflow we used to design The Economist. That's how we managed to get a product in the client's hands in literally 1 day, just to sell the vision, just to say that's something that your final app is going to look similar to that, right? So that's one step of the process. We don't have much time, so I'm just going to run you through the rest of our process real quick. Okay, so you're probably wondering why we're using a UI view and a 360 view, because essentially we could do everything within the 360 view. But as app designers and UX designers, we need to be able to create a lot of screens, iterate on flows, and you only want to focus on the interface itself. All this space around the interface is something we don't really care at this stage. We don't care about it at this stage. So we're just going to create all our flows this way in UX and in UI. If that could load, that would be great. Well, you can, okay. So you can see we have all our screens. We essentially design it the same way we would design a mobile app. And then organize all these screens into a blueprint to draw interactions and have everything to provide to developers so they're not lost. And final thing, create UI kits just like we would do for mobile apps. And that's the assets that developers like Sam can use. All right? So that's it in terms of actual design. Yeah, I'll have a mic. All right, so just a quick step back. We are telling you about our mobile web process, user experience, visual design, motion design. Motion design was a challenging bit because we were designing motion for a 360 environment, right? But because we took this approach of doing everything in 2D, why not doing motion design in 2D? It's not going to give you a real representation of the VR experience, but it will be enough to provide developers like Sam and show them that's how I imagine things moving. Now, take this 2D and make it 3D. And Sam now is going to tell you a bit more about how, about his process of implementing 2D design within a 3D space. Sam?
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, so implementing the animations was one of the funnest parts as a developer who doesn't design, because we took all of the After Effects renders and got the specific timings for the actual 2D design, and we could then use that as a reference to then develop inside a Unity 3D engine. So 2D design versus 3D implementation means exactly what Alex mentioned before. So we have a motion graphic, motion design, and we use that as a reference. So for example, when you can see there's a reference to a button or separate entities within the scene, then we use that as using and creating those separate assets. So we can then have its own behavior, like when you hover, if you tap, it has fading, has animations attached to them, and the specific timings and movement is provided by the design. So in VR, we see a lot of technical issues being solved with design solutions. For example, when we download videos on a mobile app, we put the phone down and we forget about it until it's downloaded. Whereas in VR, we're experiencing the whole environment around us, so we need to stay immersed and engaged within that environment. So one of the things we use is dynamic binaural sound, and what that does is use soundscapes and interactive, audible experiences to keep the user engaged whilst that technical back end is working. And that also works with 360 images. So you take a look around and you're looking at an environment. So what came from this project was a new kind of VR workflow. And this one is a collaboration of developers and designers. And like I said before, solving technical issues with design solutions. And this was through communication and iterative design. And through that, we created a really smooth-looking app.
Yeah, so we did create a VR design workflow, and that's a process that is at its very early stage. We've tried it on one project that came live, and we are doing it on a new project right now. But the process is not perfect, right? We only spent a few months working on it, and the design community didn't get involved. So how can we improve it? There are a few different ways, and we just listed two here. But the first one, and that's something that we heard from the clients, is that we need better prototyping. If you guys are used to design for mobile apps, websites, you probably use softwares like InVision, Marvel, all these quick prototyping softwares that allow you to design something quickly and create a prototype the same day. And that's something we need for VR, because right now we have this software called Eyes, and we can preview one image at a time. No way to have hotspots to link from one screen to another. And that's all we need. That's not something that we're going to build ourselves. That's something that we could design. But we need people like one of the big players, InVision, Marvel, anyone who wants to do it. We just need this very simple way to prototype quickly. And now we're taking this 2D approach to VR. Technically, it's not that difficult to put it together. And that's something that will improve this workflow a lot.
So what we mean with 3D UI kits is to improve upon an example like Alex showed earlier, where you can view the environment in a 2D space. So what we want to do is create a 3D UI kit which throws the designer straight into the 3D environment, so you can iterate and design without the development team being there and having to have the technical knowledge to achieve that.
So, question is, why we're here today? Well, we're really here today talking at a UX event about VR because we want more people to get involved with what we're doing. When we first started out looking at virtual reality experiences and can we design anything for it, well, there was frankly very little guidance. There were a couple of pioneers, they're basically solo, mad scientist type, vlogging on YouTube that had done some basic research to inform what we did. But really, the real acceleration in our learning started when we started speaking to other people. So it's very clear that something needs to change if we're going to get there quicker. So why is it time for designers to get involved? Well, products are becoming more complicated. What we design and developed for The Economist is actually fairly simple when it comes to an app. It's a content delivery platform, but things are going to get more and more complicated as users start becoming more sophisticated, as companies are going to start finding more interesting and wonderful ways of applying this new technology for their customers. The products that we're going to need to design are going to get more complex. So to deal with that, we need to start figuring out processes and flows and ways of doing things that are going to allow us to do it quickly and cheaply and basically, UX the shit out of it in the way that we would with any other kind of application. That kind of rapid iteration that we've tried to bring into what we're doing with VR now really actually is partly about accessibility as well. First of all, accessibility to people like you guys. Can we actually make it easy for designers to start doing this stuff and figuring out the best ways to do stuff? And the other side of it really is about accessibility for companies. Building a full-on immersive VR experience can be really, really expensive for companies. And so while, it's brilliant, go and show off, have this incredible VR experience, which is going to show that you're pushing the boundaries of the space, actually, shouldn't we also be thinking about how can we commercialize this stuff? How can we find find ways to make it really useful for our customers and users. And so to do that, actually, making it cheap to do so is really, really important. So we're hoping that by iterating a lot in the design phase, and therefore potentially reducing the amount of errors that we're going to make later on in development, the kind of partnership that these guys have had during that build, should help to bring costs down and allow for greater experimentation, and hopefully we're going to find ways to commercialise this stuff sooner. And finally, really it's about momentum. I think we've been spending, a disproportionate amount of time talking to people about virtual reality versus designing stuff at the moment. And really that's about building a network of people who can really help to solve these problems together. So we want designers, we want people in virtual reality, if they're animation studios just starting to do that stuff, or if they're the experts like these guys, to start forming partnerships. I mean, we really think that the more sorts of collaborations going on between designers like ourselves and virtual reality companies like Visualise, the quicker we're all going to learn, and the quicker we're going to realise the awesome power, the awesome potential of this new medium. So look, I'm going to hand back to Will now to just wrap us up and give us some thoughts for the future.
So what's next? I mean, one of the things that excites us the most about working in VR is that the industry is still really, really in its infancy. There is still a huge amount of grounds to cover from a design perspective, from a storytelling perspective, from an experience perspective. And VR is going to mature really, really rapidly as a technology. What's next for VR is that the hardware is going to evolve, and we're going to start to see things like more accurate hand tracking, so that you'll be able to manipulate things in VR by just using your hands to touch things. We're already seeing motion-tracked controllers on the HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift. So these are like physical controllers that you hold, and they're tracked in 3D space, and you can pick up objects in VR, you can move things around. And so I think that in the future, all of these things will needs to be designed. All of these interactions and all these things that you do in a 3D environment will need to be designed. But we're not really there yet. So I think that we can start today, as these guys are saying, keeping it simple and just sort of thinking through simple interactions, and then as the technology evolves, things are going to get a lot more crazy and a lot more interesting. So yeah, I think that's about it from us. Thank you very much.